All right, we are back for our very last lecture of the semester, discussing climate change. And unfortunately, this is a topic that gets a lot of debate in the media, even though it really shouldn't be, right? We're going to be talking about data and facts here. Um, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is a branch of the UN, and that is the panel that meets and publishes reports at many of these major conferences, like the one in Glasgow in 2021. Um, some of their reports have over 200 authors and 900 reviewers. So if you go back to our very first lecture, chapter 1 on the scientific method, and you know, scientific theory is something that has been a hypothesis that has been supported over and over and over again. Climate change falls into that category. Um, some of these papers are the most widely accepted, reviewed, and supported papers ever in science. A lot of the problem here are special interest groups and the media. The media feels this need to be balanced. So if it has a report on climate change, it feels like it needs to include a report on people who disagree with it. But we don't need to disagree with facts. We need to disagree with maybe how we deal with these things. So there could be a debate about what's the best way to capture carbon, or what are some of the best economic ways to deal with this problem. Should we tax? Should we increase prices? Should we give incentives? Right, there are plenty of issues that are up for debate, but whether or not climate change exists should not be a debate. And there are a lot of players that have added to that confusion by trying to show both sides, or who have a vested interest in getting people to believe that it is up for debate and that we're not certain about it. One thing that's important to know when we talk about climate change is that the climate of Earth has not been stable forever, right? Has been a lot of variations in Earth's climate. So this is looking at climate over the past 900,000 years. So we have almost a million years worth of data here, and we can see that it's fluctuated a lot. And some of the ways that this has been determined is by looking at ice cores, which I'm going to talk about, looking at the fossil record, what would have grown, different pollen that has shown up at different times, right? Is this a warm plant or a cold plant, looking at the types of carbon isotopes that are in shells of fish, like mollusks and things like that, or in coral. So we have different ways of going back and estimating what the climate has been, and it definitely has varied. But that doesn't mean that the current climate change is natural. We have evidence that the current climate change is happening faster than in the past, and that it is due to humans. And we're going to go through some of that. But just to show you that we can look at these ice core samples from Antarctica, you can dig all the way down through the ice, and each year there's some new ice put down, and you can look at little air bubbles in there and look at the carbon dioxide levels in there and the methane levels in there, and analyze like pollen and dust and things like that to get an idea of the climate in the past. The carbon dioxide and methane levels currently are higher than any time in the past 800,000 years. So if we, go back a slide, the temperature has varied, but we are above those temperatures now, and above those carbon dioxide and methane levels now. So I know everyone's heard of the greenhouse effect, and how bad it is, and that's what's heating up the Earth. And I want to explain what the greenhouse effect is, and also to let you know that the greenhouse effect is actually a normal and natural effect that life on Earth depends on. So what it is that the sun shines down onto the Earth. Some of that radiation gets absorbed by the earth. So that's what this arrow here is showing. And that warms the surface of the earth, right? So the top layer of soil is warmer than if you dig down, right? Some of it bounces off the earth, which is what we're seeing here. Some of it escapes into space, but because we have an atmosphere and we have some gases here, the stuff that bounces back into space actually comes, some of it bounces back to the Earth, right? It gets trapped by those gases and comes back to Earth. That's why our air is warm, right? This is why at night it's not like the dark side of the moon. It doesn't turn into the same temperature as outer space. It is warm because we have these trapped gases. So life on Earth depends on this greenhouse effect. It is normal and natural. What is not natural is how many gases we have now. So it's like saying we're usually supposed to have a thin cotton blanket on Earth that kind of traps a little bit of heat. But instead, we've added so many gases, it's like we have a down comforter, right? So we have this big, thick blanket now that's trapping too much heat. That is the issue currently when we talk about the greenhouse effect. So we can look at temperature data and patterns from the late 1800s when people started keeping track of these things through today. And the average temperature ending in like 2010 or higher now was about half a degrees Celsius higher. We can look at how the heat content in the oceans absorb a lot of heat from the air. Um, and you can see these are in different places across the globe that have been measuring this, and the ocean heat content, the amount of energy that it's storing has increased over the past 60 years. And we can look at the carbon dioxide levels in the ocean. As the temperature has gone up, we can see here's the temperature here is increasing. And these are also carbon dioxide levels as the Earth's temperature and carbon dioxide increase, the ocean is absorbing more carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is increasing. Carbon dioxide actually absorbed in water, it dissolves and it makes it more acidic. So that's why a carbonated beverage is more acidic. All of that carbon in it. So as that becomes more acidic, the pH goes down. So remember, pH acids have a low pH. So as carbon goes up, pH goes down. This is the acidification of the oceans. This kills coral reefs. This is also organisms have adapted to certain pH levels in their environment. And so lowering that pH, and it says here, lower pH equals more acid. Lowering that pH affects ecosystems. And then if we just look at how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, you can see we go from in the 1960s about 320 parts per million and up until present time when it's over 400. And if I didn't look at today's carbon dioxide, there's always something posted, but in April 2021, it was at 419 parts per million. 2021. So that is a significant increase from the 1960s where it was, below 320. And if we look at these, anytime you're looking at carbon dioxide data, it always has this spiky look. And you can see the trend is still upwards, but it goes up and down and up and down. This is because of seasonal differences, right? So in the summer, there are more trees leafed out and absorbing carbon dioxide, so the carbon dioxide levels go down. And then in the winter, the leaves fall off the trees. They're not absorbing as much carbon dioxide and photosynthesizing, so the carbon dioxide levels go up. But we still have a very significant upward trend. And these are just, you don't have to memorize all of this, but these are just some of the consequences of increasing temperatures. And we are now trying to keep things at 1.5 to 2 degrees. That's what the most recent Glasgow conference was about. And we need to act in very extreme ways in order to keep ourselves in this green zone. So what are some of the impacts on biological systems? One of them is the life cycle shifts. So as things warm up, the times that things like come into bloom in the spring, when organisms migrate, when they reproduce, these things are going to change. And many of these systems have co-evolved. Remember when we talked about plants and animals co-evolving? The plants bloom at the time when the animals are there, often when they're in their peak reproduction time when they need a lot of energy. So as the birds may migrate at a different time than flowers are blooming, they're going to decouple, and this is going to hurt both species. So classic examples with hummingbirds and lilies. The hummingbirds migrate at specific times to coincide with peak lily bloom, and as the this is a picture of a broad-tailed hummingbird. Since the 1970s, the flowers that they depend on have been flowering about 4.5 days earlier per decade. So we're now at about 2 weeks earlier bloom time, but the hummingbirds have only shifted about 1.5 days earlier per decade. So the hummingbirds are coming like 3 or 4 days earlier than they used to, but the flowers are blooming 2 weeks earlier. So they're getting more and more out of sync over time. Diseases are also spreading, right? So mosquitoes that rely on warm, wet conditions, they are not being killed over the winter like they used to when we have a cold frost. Um, and they are adapting to more northern climates because they're warming up. So they are spreading more diseases. So insect-borne diseases are increasing. And um, both in animals but also in plants. So this is a beetle in that spreads diseases in pine trees. So this is a pine beetle in the lodgepole pine forest in the western United States. And as you can see, they used to die off. Most of the beetles would die off every winter, and there would just be a few eggs that survive. And now they survive the winter and are killing many of the trees. So, that's a very, very brief discussion of um, climate change. Not a lot of detail there. Obviously, you could have an entire semester focused on the biological impacts of climate change. But now let's talk about some strategies for conservation, right? I put a few little things in there, and I want to just talk about some bigger picture things, not that individuals necessarily can do, but that, governments and large like even corporations could do. So we need good science to know what the problems are and to know what potential solutions may be. And then we need good policy to make that happen. And we need international cooperation, right? Something like climate change is a global problem, and no one country can say, we're going to change things. Everybody has to be working together. But with that, you can reverse and prevent environmental disasters. Um, so we need to, first of all, figure out what our priorities are. So, something, just a thought thing here is if you had power and huge funding, um, how would you decide what to protect, and what would you put your money towards? So conservation biologists and policymakers have to weigh a lot of factors when they are making these decisions. So there are different approaches. Some people and bodies decide to just save individual species, like let's see what's endangered and put our money towards that. So like the U.S. Endangered Species Act does that. If a species is determined to have very low numbers, then that species becomes protected. But other groups like the UN takes an ecosystem approach, and they say these entire ecosystems are endangered. We're not just going to save one species in it, but we're going to assume if that one species is at risk, then everybody is. Let's save the ecosystem. That entire ecosystem must be protected. So these are very different approaches to conservation. And neither one is necessarily better or worse than the other, and they probably work really well in concert. So that is it for the semester. It has been, let me get back to my video here. It's been really lovely kind of teaching you biology all along the way. And I hope that you've been able to take some lessons from this and be able to apply it to your everyday life and understand things that you're reading or things that you see out in the world a little bit better, and that you feel like you are now a better science citizen who can, make wise decisions based on the science that you read. Good luck. Bye bye.